Welcome to a series that we call The End of Times, where we're going through the book of Revelation verse by verse to do our best to understand what it is we can expect to happen in the end times, or the times Jesus referred to in Matthew 24 as the end of the age. And where we are at this point is we've gone through Revelation verse by verse, and John has been taken up in the Spirit to the throne room of God, where he sees that Jesus is only worthy to open a scroll that God has, and there's 7 seals, and he's opened all of the seals except for the 6th and 7th one, and that's kind of where we were at last episode. So let's just jump right in. Revelation 6:12. I looked when he opened the 6th seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood. And the stars of heaven fell to the earth as a fig tree drops its late figs when it is shaken by a mighty wind. Then the sky receded as a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place. And the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the commanders, the mighty men, every slave, every free man, hid himself in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath has come, and who is able to stand? Now what we're talking about is destruction so great that it blacks out the earth. And there's this is brought up several times in Revelation. It's brought up in Isaiah 13:10, Joel 12:01, Amos 8, Ezekiel 32, Matthew 24:29, Mark 13:24, and Acts 2:10. This is regularly brought up time and time again, this event where God's judgment on earth has officially arrived. And it means that the sky goes dark and burning sulfur falls down to the earth, and it's really just not a pretty sight for anybody on the earth. So we dedicated last episode to kind of understand what is that, and we're dedicating this episode to when can we expect that to happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by saying that, there's not a lot of timelines we can count on when it comes to Revelation. There's only a few. Matthew 24 shows us that we are in that season of the end of the age. But it's Daniel 12 that gives us this moment of the abomination of desolation, where 3.5 years or 1,290 days of tribulation ends, and blessed is he who makes it to the 1,335th day. And we went over that particular timeline, and I'll just kind of remind you of it here. Here what you have is, as soon as that abomination of desolation occurs, you have 1,290 days before the end of tribulation, and then an additional 45 days take you to the 1,335th day with Christ's return. So there's this space at the end, which is kind of where this happens. So how can we know when this is going to take place in this timeline? Well, I believe Daniel 8 makes it very clear when it is we can expect this to happen. So we're going to take this episode, we're going to go back to Daniel 8, because Daniel 8 is talking about the end times and what that looks like, and we're going to attach a date to this. So let's jump to Daniel 8, and we're going to start in verse 10. What's taking place here is Daniel's seen a vision of a goat and a ram, and it gets kind of complicated what he sees here. We're not going to get into that in this episode. We're just going to interpret that vision here. So we're going to pick it up in 10. And it grew up to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the hosts and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. So we're talking about the Antichrist. He even exalted himself as high as the Prince of Hosts, and by him the daily sacrifices were taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. So we're talking about the abomination of desolation here now. So now we got a timeline we can work with. Because of transgression, an army was given over to the horn to oppose the daily sacrifices, and he cast truth down to the ground. So he's clearly just lying. Truth doesn't mean anything. He did all this and prospered, and he succeeded at it too. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that certain one who is speaking, how long will the vision be concerning the daily sacrifices? Now we're talking about the abomination. So a holy angelic being is asking this. And the transgression of desolation, the giving of both sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot. And he said to me, for 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. And that's a very significant verse. But let's kind of keep going, and we'll come back to that one. Jump to 15. Now it happened when I, Daniel, had seen the vision and was seeking the meaning, that suddenly there stood before me one having the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Ulai, which is a river he was having this vision on, who called and said, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. So, this is great, because now we can understand it. We'll jump to 19. And he said, look, I am making known to you what shall happen in the latter time of the indignation, for at the appointed time the end shall be. So he's making it clear, as we're talking about the end times here. The ram which you saw, having the two horns, they are the kings of Media and Persia. And the male goat is a kingdom of Greece. The large horn that is between its eyes is the first king. So we're talking about Alexander the Great here. As for the broken horn and the four that stood up in his place, 4 kingdoms shall arise out of that nation, but not with its power. So we're talking about the 4 generals that then took over his territory after his death. 23. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their fullness, now we're back to the end times, a king shall arise, having fierce features, who understands sinister schemes. His power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. He shall destroy fearfully, and shall prosper and thrive. He shall destroy the mighty and also the holy people. Through his cunning he shall cause deceit to prosper under his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart. He shall destroy many in their prosperity. He shall even rise against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without human hand. And this is very important, 26. And the vision of the evenings and the mornings which was told is true. Therefore, seal up the vision, for it refers to many days in the future. So now let's go back to this timeline, because they did give us a timeline in Daniel 8, 13 and 14. How long will the vision be concerning the daily sacrifices and the transgression of desolation, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot? And he said to me, for 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. Now, this verse is greatly misinterpreted throughout all the scholars on the planet, because this 2,300 days doesn't fit anything on the timeline at all. As a matter of fact, it specifically says in a few chapters later that from the desolation, or the abomination of desolation, you have 1,290 days, and then blessed is he who makes it to the 1,335th day. So where's this 2,300 days fit? It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit anywhere, and that's because they're not looking at the true meaning of the Hebrew words. All the English translations are wrong with this one. At least I haven't seen one that's got it right. But if you look at the Hebrew words, what it says is it will take 2,300 Arab Boker, which means it'll take 2,300 mornings and evenings. And we know this to be true because those are the Hebrew words, but then it also says it in 26. And the vision of the evenings and the mornings which was told is true. Therefore seal up the vision, for it refers to many days in the future. So when people hear this 2,300 mornings and evenings, they immediately say, well, they're talking about days. We're talking about 2,300 days here. But that's not what they're talking about. What they're talking about is the daily sacrifices in the temple, because we're talking about the abomination and desolation of the temple. Every day since the beginning of the sacrifices in the sanctuary and then the temple back with Moses, or the sanctuary with Moses, and then eventually the temple with Solomon, and then this rebuilt temple that we're dealing with now, every day starts with the sacrifice of a spotless lamb. Then all the other sacrifices can take place. That's referred to as the morning. And then every day ends with the sacrifice of a spotless, innocent lamb, and those are referred to as the evenings. So he says 2,300 mornings and evenings. So it's easy to say that one morning and one evening equals one day. I mean, we only get one morning and one evening every day. So 2300 doesn't fit. This doesn't fit anywhere because they're looking at it through the context of days. But there's 2 sacrifices per day. So the sacrifices, 2300 mornings and evenings, is actually, that's 2 a day. We're talking 1,150 days. So from the abomination of desolation, the sacrifices stop for 1,150 days. Then there is no more mornings and evenings. And the only thing that determines the mornings and evenings is the sun. When the sun comes up, we know it's morning. When it goes down, we know it's evening. That's what determines the mornings and the evenings. So after 1,150 days, the sun stops rising, is what this means. And a lot of Jewish scholars will interpret this the exact same way, but you'll never hear talk of this. People just say 2,300 days, but they can't explain what that means. But if you read it at 2,300 mornings and evenings, well, that's a whole different story. Now we're talking 1,150 days, and that's extremely significant. So now if we take a look at our timeline, we've added another line. So what we're looking at is you have the abomination of desolation. You have 1,290 days, and 1,335 days is when Christ returns. And then you have the witnesses who started 30 days after the abomination. They went for 1,260 days. But now we have this evening and morning sacrifices stopping for 1,150 days, starting with the abomination of desolation. And I believe it is on that 1,150th day that then the sun is blocked out. So that gives us a timeline on when we can expect Revelation 6:12 through 17 to happen, as well as, again, this event is brought up many other times throughout Revelation on when that can happen. And then it is on the 1,335th day that the clouds of heaven opens up, and of course then we see Christ's triumphant return. So we have this period of time where the sun is just blocked out. I do believe there's a period of time when those, because I think this happens before the rapture of the church occurs, but then the rapture of the church occurs somewhere in there as well. So I hope this helps. Again, it's greatly misinterpreted. I'm sure if you Google Revelation or Daniel 8 on what does this 2,300 days mean, I'm sure everybody's going to say, they're going to try to give some hokey explanation of what that means, unless they say the true Hebrew words, which is 2,300 mornings and evenings, and they're specifically talking about the sacrifices at the temple. I mean, that's what this whole entire chapter is about. So I hope this helps. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. We'll just keep adding to this timeline, and we'll just keep rolling, and we'll just pick up Revelation 7 after this, verse 1. So if you like this video, click like and subscribe. If you feel called to support our channel through Patreon, that link is also below. But the most important part of this channel is we take prayer requests, so never hesitate to send that in. Thank you for watching this episode of God, Family, and Guns. And as always, love God, love your family, and love guns.